Let me tell you a story about a place where time doesn't behave the way it should. A story about a journalist named Simon Wade who thought he was hunting a mystery but discovered the mystery was hunting him. Simon's GPS kept losing signal, his phone showed no bars, and the radio played only static. He was following a lead about 17 people who had vanished from a small town called Elmsworth over the past 30 years, all from the same place of ridge that locals called Cursed. It begins with a drive through the mountains of Oregon on a road that seems to resist being traveled. 847 became 831, then 824, then 817. The most recent addition, barely visible, showed 803. Simon would later learn that each scratch number marked another disappearance. The welcome sign hung crooked when Simon finally arrived. Elmsworth, founded 1873, it read, but someone had been scratching out the population numbers. Like someone had pressed a button and everything had simply stopped progressing. The cars were old but well maintained. The buildings showed no signs of renovation or decay. Even the people moved with a certain reluctance, as if they were afraid that too much activity might draw unwanted attention. The town felt frozen in time, not abandoned but paused. Simon's first stop was Lila's Diner, a place that looked like it had been transplanted from 1985. The box was labeled Ashford Ridge Unsolved, and it contained 30 years of reports, photographs, and one item that made Simon's blood run cold, a leather journal bound with string. The waitress, Beth, had the hollow-eyed look of someone who had seen too much. When Simon mentioned the ridge, her coffee pot trembled in her hands. Sheriff Marcus Holt. He disappeared in 1987, the same year he started investigating the ridge. Left this behind along with instructions. If you start remembering things that haven't happened yet, run faster. The disappearances weren't random, they followed a musical progression like notes in a song that was slowly building to a crescendo. And in the margins of the reports, someone had been adding symbols. Circular designs that looked almost ritualistic, like ancient timekeeping devices. Some places are meant to stay empty, son, the man said. Some doors are meant to stay closed. People don't talk about Ashford Ridge, she whispered, glancing around nervously. Not anymore. Not since the pattern started. An old man in the corner booth looked up from his newspaper, a newspaper that Simon noticed was dated 3 weeks ago. The usual? She asked, pouring coffee before he could answer. Extra black, no sugar. You've been coming here every day for a week. But when he reviewed the photos later, he found something impossible in 3 separate shots. He appeared in the background of his own motel room. But he hadn't been there. The other Simon was older, scarred, and staring directly at the camera with eyes that held terrible knowledge. Simon pressed for details, but Beth and the old man exchanged a look that spoke of shared secrets and old fears. They told him about the disappearances, but only in fragments. A hiker in 1954, a surveyor in 1963, private investigator in 1971. No, she said slowly. No, you've been here. Every cycle usually takes them a week to find the library. Elmsworth, she said, was built on one of those tiers. It feeds, she said matter-of-factly. Takes someone who's gotten too close to the truth. Usually someone whose job it is to ask questions. Investigators. Journalists, people who notice patterns, the strange patterns, the assignment from his editor. But they felt, then, like he was remembering someone else's memories. Ridge was the center of it, a place where time folded in on itself, creating loops and echoes and impossible overlaps. Marla asked gently. She gestured to a chair that had been pulled as if waiting for him. But it came out hollow. That's impossible. Sit down, Marla asked. Tell me, mister. Wade, do you remember why you came here? We're not Wade. Let me tell you about the Ashford Fold. You ordered the same thing, asked the same questions. You even left the same tip. The dates followed a pattern every 8 years at first, then accelerating. 7 years, then 6, then 5. If the pattern held, the next disappearance was overdue. There's another one who's been here 3 years, and somewhere up there, he pointed to the ridge. There is one who has been here since the beginning. 5 of them, all Simon Wade, all trapped in different parts of the same temporal loop. The eldest could barely remember his original life. The youngest still remembered the outside world clearly. Each one had discovered the pattern, followed the clues, and become part of the mystery they were trying to solve. The local sheriff, a weathered man named Dunley, was reluctant to help, but something in Simon's persistence or perhaps desperation convinced him to open the files. But it requires understanding what the ridge really is, he said finally. A generator that created temporal energy by trapping observers in loops. The ridge wasn't just a place where time moves strangely. It was a machine. A hiker from 1954, a surveyor from 1963, a missing person investigator from 1971. All different professions, different decades, but all drawn to the ridge by the same pattern of disappearances. People who noticed patterns, who asked questions, who remembered what others forgot. I'm writing a story about the disappearances. It creates temporal energy by trapping people like us, people who ask questions. Something is trying to get through from the other side. Something that makes missing people look like a mercy. It was covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. It fed on investigation itself, using their questions to power the seal that kept something terrible from breaking through. Rounded, arranged in a careful pattern were 17 chairs. 16 were occupied, but there was a third option whispered by the oldest Simon, the one who had been trapped the longest, worn smooth by decades of hikers. At the trailhead, someone had left a car, his car. Same make, same model, same license plate. But this one was covered in rust and leaves as if it had been there for years. She was a woman in her 70s with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see through everything. You're the journalist, she said before he could introduce himself. Wondered when you'd find me. This belonged to my predecessor, Sheriff Dunley explained. He walked into the door, not through it, but into it. If you start forgetting things, run. Inside was a vast library made of memory containing every story ever told in Elmsworth. Every life ever lived, every moment ever experienced. The instructions were written in careful handwriting on the journal's first page. Never go alone. Never stay after dark. Simon spent his first night in Elmsworth at the Benaview Motel, spreading the files across his bed. He walked the streets of Elmsworth, looking for answers. The town was too quiet. He photographed everything, taking careful notes. Simon couldn't sleep. Too perfect. Barking dogs, no late-night TV flickering through windows. When the door opens, when the other side comes through, someone has to remember what was lost. Just what if I could give you a better story? The steady ticking of in this story, the disappearances stopped. The door closed naturally. The trapped souls found peace. The town healed. And the observer, the one who had noticed the patterns, got to go home. That grandfather clock in the welcome sign read population 847, and someone had painted over all the scratched out numbers. The radio played normal music and his phone showed full bars. The seated figures rose from their chairs, confused but free. The door sealed itself, not with force, but with completion. One by one, the other Simons faded away, not destroyed, but returned to their proper places in time. Beth always answers, but no one is ever there. Just the sound of wind through trees and very faintly the voice of a man saying thank you. Simon declined, asking for human interest stories instead. Stories about people who come home. Library that seem to, and somewhere in the space between memory and forgetting, a door stays closed by choice rather than force. Echo through the entire town. The next morning, Beth at the diner greeted him like an old friend. Simon stared at her. I arrived yesterday. Beth's face went pale, himself. The same face, but weathered and scarred, with eyes that had seen too much. That's when Simon realized something was very wrong with time in Elmsworth. The town librarian, Marla Clearwater, had been expecting him. You've been expecting me. They always send someone. I explained it like this. Time isn't a river flowing in one direction. It's more like fabric, and sometimes that fabric develops tears. Every few years, Simon laughed, is it? The question hit him like cold water. For a moment, his mind was blank. Then the memories rushed back, the missing persons reports, the disappearances. What disappearances? At night, he found himself at the base of Ashford Ridge without remembering how he got there. A trail wound up through the trees. You knew, said a voice behind him. Simon turned to find himself face to face with. How long have you been here? The other Simon asked. 3 days, Simon replied, though he wasn't sure if that was true. I'd been here 3 months, the other Simon said. They met at midnight in the woods below the ridge. You're thinking there has to be a way out, said the Simon who had been there 3 years. There is. The truth was worse than Simon had imagined. The summit of the ridge, Simon found a clearing with a perfect circle of black metal in the center. The seated figures spoke in turn, each telling their story. The door isn't an exit, explained the figure from 1954. It's a generator, but why? Simon asked. To keep the door closed, replied the figure from 2019, another journalist, just like him. The machine needed their curiosity, their need to solve mysteries. Simon was faced with a choice, sit down and become part of the machine, helping to keep the door sealed, or let it open and release whatever was on the other side. Break the machine, the ancient Simon said. Destroy the door, set everyone free. They'll all disappear into the fold, but the door will close forever. What's the cost? Simon asked. Elmsworth, the town, everyone in it. Instead of choosing, Simon did something unexpected. A figure made of starlight and shadow greeted him. You're not supposed to be here. I'm a journalist, Simon said. I go where the story is. The story is over. It's been over for 70 years. Then why keep telling it? The figure paused. Because someone has to remember. What do you give up? Simon sat down at an impossible typewriter made of crystallized time. He began to type, crafting a new narrative for Elmsworth. Stories require sacrifice, the figure said. The mystery, Simon replied. The need to know. The obsession with solving everything. And in return, everyone else gets to forget, gets to move on, gets to be normal. The machine began to shut down. Simon Wade drove out of Elmsworth on a Tuesday morning. The GPS worked perfectly. He remembered everything and nothing. The story was over, but the story would never be told. That was the price of closure. 6 months later, Simon's editor offered him another assignment, a small town with mysterious disappearances, real spooky stuff. In Elmsworth, the phone at Lila's Diner rings once every Tuesday at 3:47 p.m. The ridge stands empty now. Time moves forward as it should, because the best stories aren't about what was lost. They're about what was saved. And sometimes the greatest mystery is knowing when to stop looking for answers